At the beginning of the film, it is stated that it is based on real events that took place in late 2020 to early 2021 during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Living in Brockton, Massachusetts, financial analyst Keith Gill invests $53,000, half of all his money, in GameStop stocks at $3.85 per share, believing them to be undervalued. Keith lives in a rented house with his wife Caroline and their young child. In the evenings, he starts his daily YouTube livestream under the pseudonym Roaring Kitty. He selects assets for investment and explains to viewers why he finds them interesting. People follow his publicly accessible investment portfolio. Keith also launches a forum group called Wall Street Bets on the Reddit platform. Subscribers eagerly await each of his new posts. Gabe Plotkin, the founder of the hedge fund Melvin Capital, heavily sells GameStop shares he doesn't own, shorting them and putting pressure on their price. A fan of Roaring Kitty's broadcasts, nurse Jenny Campbell from Pittsburgh, who has $45,000 in debt, also buys GameStop shares. Jenny realizes that Melvin Capital and billionaire hedge fund manager Ken Griffin are trying to profit speculatively from the decline in GameStop shares. However, if GameStop goes bankrupt after an intentional stock price crash, people will lose their jobs. A Roaring Kitty subscriber from Detroit, salesman Marcos Garcia, also invests his last $136 in GameStop shares. University student friends in Austin, Texas, Harmony Williams and Riri Parizio, with debts exceeding $100,000, also buy GameStop shares. Keith's coordinated purchase of GameStop shares by a large number of small investors leads to a five-fold increase in their value by Christmas. Gabe and Ken are confident that, as always, small investors, derogatorily referred to as dumb money on Wall Street, will lose and their money will go to their hedge funds. Keith's subscribers mainly use the online brokerage app Robinhood for investing, founded by Vlad Tenev and Baiju Bhatt. Robinhood allows commission-free trading by routing customer trade orders to market makers. The largest market maker is Ken Griffin's company Citadel Securities, which shares part of its profits with Robinhood. Meanwhile, GameStop shares surge by 90% in one day. Keith already has $11 million in paper profit, and his brother Kevin urges him to sell the shares and lock in the profit. Gabe, whose hedge fund has already incurred billion-dollar losses, calls his friend, billionaire and head of the .72 hedge fund Steve Cohen in Greenwich, Connecticut, asking for help. He agrees to become an investor, as does Ken Griffin. As a result, Gabe's hedge fund receives an additional $3 billion in funding. The Wall Street Bets forum is shut down on the pretext of inciting hatred. Because of his activities, Keith faces the threat of being fired from his job. Harmony and Riri, not seeing posts about Keith's balance, reluctantly sell their shares, locking in profits in the hundreds of thousands. Marcos also sells half of his shares. Vlad receives a call from the depository demanding a $3 billion deposit from Robinhood to cover all customer orders. He decides to talk to Ken. The next day, people discover that buying GameStop shares on Robinhood is no longer available. Dissatisfied, Baiju calls his partner Vlad. He explains that the depository agreed to reduce the deposit to $7 million if they close the option to buy GameStop shares. Baiju is unhappy because Ken has a significant influence on the depository. Protesters suffering losses gather around Robinhood's office. Vlad, Ken, Gabe, and Keith receive congressional summonses. Vlad denies Citadel's influence on his decisions. Ken says he has no connection to Robinhood's decision to limit trading. Gabe is focused on his company. Keith says there were no chances for ordinary investors, or at least there weren't until now. As for him, he believes in GameStop stocks and has no intention of selling them. On April 16, 2021, Keith makes his last post, and his net worth is estimated at $34 million. Jenny continues to hold the shares, and her net worth is minus $14,000.